there are no super tools that can solve all the problems that people have by talking to each other. So I think this doesn't go away. But the nice thing is, so maybe this is like a good part to really spend a little bit time on, to really sketch out, okay, what are basically the things that the metric layer does, and also like what kind of opportunity does it provide, but let's say what kind of things it doesn't solve. So to also like to make it sure, okay, this is basically the these are the boundaries. But I definitely pick up one thing that you already said, is like it improves time to value. So because you don't have to create potentially these batched 50 different kind of tables, so maybe you just need to prepare, I don't know, less of that, and you can then use the metric layer on top of it to basically accomplish the same thing, but without this complicated kind of setup and weirdness.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think you maybe mentioned it already, because like one thing that's definitely totally different with the metrics layer is like it's not really batched. So what we just discussed before, like the transformational stuff, is usually something that happens in some kind of batch job. So this is how DBT is. So you have a DBT job that's basically running all your different kind of SQL queries in the right sequence, and then in the end it, let's say, materialize everything in some kind of tables in the end. But it's a kind of a batch job, so it runs one time a day, maybe 3 or 4 times a day, depending. But that's it. So you cannot really react to, hey, I have a new idea how I want to use these kind of dimensions and metrics together. So this is like,
Yeah.
and I guess the metrics layer is not batch, so I guess it's different.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good point. So I spent a long time talking about how is the transformation layer working today if you don't have a metrics layer.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you do have a metrics layer, what's different about the transform layer? So what you change is, and the main problem we spoke about, right, was the flexibility
Yes.
of the transform layer, which it's not. You materialize a table, and if you want to, which is to answer a specific question, if you want to change the granularity, if you want a sales daily, a sales weekly, a sales monthly, you can't just at query time change that. You need to go back to the transform layer, create a new model.
Yeah.
In there, create a new table in your warehouse, which is sales quarterly, and then provide it to the user, right? So there's a lot of technical work that goes in, because you need to know how to materialize tables in the database. You need to know how to write a query.
Yeah.
You need to know how to maybe they say quarterly, but actually if it's a leap year, something different happens. So there'll be a ton of stuff going on there. And so what we do with the metrics layer is, instead of having those final stages, so if you use DBT, you've got your nice lineage graph, with on the left hand side you've got all of your raw tables, and on the right are kind of like the ready to go ones: sales daily, sales weekly, sales quarterly, etc. You're going to stop modeling those aggregated tables at the end. So you remove the sales quarterly and sales daily, and what you do with the metrics layer is you basically delay the aggregation to runtime. So when you ask for a query, you say, "Oh, I just want to see sales weekly," or "I want to see sales quarterly," and you don't have to predefine what that means. And now the big question is like, well, how on earth does that work? If you think about your transformation models at the end, you basically have the metrics layer takes snippets of SQL. So if you say total revenue, is basically a sum over this column. It's the sum over the basket size for baskets that have been checked out, for example, in an e-commerce case. And so what you do is you stop writing these inflexible SQL models to answer one specific question, and you start just writing the important bits of business logic. So like, what's revenue, what's total unique users, what's an active user, and you write those small snippets. And then what the metrics layer is designed to do is to allow users to compose those snippets in a way that makes sense, and it does that using like a more of a business friendly language rather than a engineering language. So the engineering language is joins, foreign keys, primary keys, group bys, and the business language is, I want to see total revenue by month, or I want to see total sales by product category. And it removes a lot of the technical lingo. And there are a lot of other benefits of locking that business logic into the metrics layer. But a lot of the time people talk about the metrics layer as being fantastic for governance, which is true, but that's also true for the transform layer.
Yes.
Because we're writing the business logic in the tables, and it's there, and it's in version control. We're getting much better at that as a data community. So like we do have great governance actually in writing our transformations in DBT. And you keep that in the metrics layer, but it gives you governance plus some extra flexibility.
Yes, and you're right. I think in the discussion, the flexibility usually comes. I think it's not pointed out well enough because I guess that, let's say, the governance part is where most people have the most pain because, like, in the end, because like you had this great example where you say, okay, we have this two states. So one is like, okay, we do everything unaggregated. It's all is pure, and so from there you can basically do really the right thing, but then you have the problem that the right thing doesn't happen because like someone from, let's say, business part goes in there, don't have the context and comes up with a dashboard and chart, and data team looks at it and says, actually this doesn't really work. So because you basically put, I don't know, let's say different kind of things next to each other which cannot belong there, you aggregate stuff wrongly, and so you build the averages wrong. And I think this is like where people then immediately say, hey, yeah, the metrics layer solved that, and it does. But you're missing the point that because like the other way would be like, because this is like this very prepared data, where you mean, okay, you take full control how stuff is worked up, but it slows you down, let's say, dramatically. So the data team is usually the one that doesn't have a lot of free time. And so if you come up with an approach where you say, hey, actually, we want to make sure that everything is in the right way, so we basically spend 80 hours more the week to generate everything, that doesn't really work out because like there's no one there to do that. And in it all, also like it embraces, and this, I think this is my problem, because like you totally get me convinced because I know that analysis doesn't really work so linear. So you don't really want to close down this possibility that people can say, hey, yeah, I have some first ideas, I check some numbers, and then I come up with some other ideas. And if these other ideas means I have to create another ticket to get it in 6 weeks, this usually, you can forget it. It will not really work. People will not analyze stuff. So you have to make sure that you have a system where people can say, hey, hypothesis A looks good. Now let's develop hypothesis B, and to do it quickly. And I think this, for example, is for me like the major reason why I like the metrics layer, because it gives me the possibility to do two things. And this is what I always like. If you can, on the one hand, improve, let's say, the time or speed to value, or with flexibility, and on the other hand, make sure that people don't go wrong, so you keep quality up. This is usually like where I want to end up. And
yeah, I agree. And I think that the testament for how easy it is to use it, in my experience, the engineers use the metrics layer as well, you know, for exploring data. Like once you've invested into it, it's so much easier to query than the underlying tables. You'll find it's not like exactly like a low code, you know, overly simplified abstraction of the data. It really becomes the primary way for you to interact with the business data. It's really useful. The thing you said is that it does come at a cost. You know, it's not free. You have to maintain the metrics layer in the same way that before you were maintaining your transform layer. But the difference is when you're maintaining the transformations, you're maintaining specific answers. Like this is the definitive answer to this one question. Whereas with the metrics layer, you're not maintaining just one-off answers. You're maintaining just the business logic and the metrics that can be used to compose multiple answers. So I think we wrote a blog post on this recently for Semantic BI, you know, and we found out if you have, you know, 5 metrics with 10 dimensions. So dimension is, I can split total users by their geography. That's a dimension, or, you know, by the time they signed up, that's another dimension. So you imagine 10 sort of dimensions and 5 metrics. You have like 30,000 possible combinations of those, you know, like all distinct questions that can be asked. And that's not even considering how you could filter the results differently. So it just provides a huge amount of flexibility. But
it does.
This has become the theme. And the last time I spoke about the metrics layer, I ended up talking loads about governance. So there's so many different ways to come at it.
No, I think it's worth pointing out. And the good thing is, like you said, like maintaining an additional system. And so which brings us to the point to see, okay, how does actually Lightdash uses a metric layer? Because like I think one thing that what I really like about the Lightdash solution is like it makes this, hey, there's another system where I have to do stuff and maintain stuff as easy as possible. because like, I mean, you made one decision that can make, let's say, this additional thing, let's say, as straightforward as possible. So